Okay, so longer version of the pyramid video, a bit more time we can take on things like YouTube. So again, basic idea is we're trying to understand things from the viewpoint of a pyramid. Not that there's anything magical about the shape of a pyramid, just that it makes sense that you understand how things stack on top of each other and how success in the skill and movement level depends on how well you've done in the preceding levels. So first and foremost, the spinal hygiene level. So here we're talking about avoiding your back pain aggravators, the things that sensitize your back to pain or are causing the structural damage. So for example, let's say you have a disc protrusion, which could be a bulge or a herniation. We know that that's caused by flexion, and we test you and we find that flexion, compressed flexion, sensitizes your back to pain. First thing we need to do, if that's your aggravator and the cause of your pain, we need to find out where that movement, that pain trigger is occurring during the day, and how do we begin to avoid, minimize, or at least mitigate it as much as possible so that disc bulge or herniation has got a chance to settle down and chance to heal, and the pain's got a chance to subside as well. So that could be looking at, maybe how you sit, how you stand, how you bend over and do things. Do we need to give you lumbar support in the car? Maybe some lumbar support, extra support in bed. More support maybe at work when you're sitting. Maybe you need to change your sitting habits so you kneel and you stand more. Maybe you need to use a sit-stand desk a bit more to mitigate that kind of compressed flexion that's going on in your back. So here we need to sort of desensitize pain as much as possible, but also we have not necessarily a phenomenon, but a problem we need to work around, which is arthrogenic muscular inhibition. So that basically means that when we create pain around a joint, it changes and it starts to impair the muscles around that joint that we need to use. So for example, glutes are very susceptible to it, and in my opinion, so are your muscles around your core. So if we have those pain triggers, those aggravators going on, we're constantly creating pain. Not only are we draining the idea of the bank account and draining things and making things just really more sensitive and weak, we're also starting to impair the muscles we need to use that would be helping take workload around the back, from the back. So for example, your core and your glutes. The more feeble and confused your core and your glutes are, the more that workload has to go into your back. So if we can stop the mechanic of what's causing that imbalance and that impairment, we've already started to win half the battle. And also on the next level, we talk about components. Here we're talking about your core. Can you make a brace? Can you control your hips with your glutes to do like a hip hinge, like a basic glute bridge maybe, for example? The ability to do these things well is really heavily dependent on how good of a job you've done on this level. Because if you do a good job with your exercises, but this foundation is weak, it's going to keep dragging you back. So you might do 2 or 3 sets of exercises, do a good job, yeah, I can feel my glutes are working on the glute bridges, I feel solid, but then you spend the rest of the day sat like an idiot, it's going to shut them all back down again. So at best case, you're going to get back to sort of, just keep going back to square one. If we can minimize those pain triggers and aggravators, the skills we build here and the strength we build here is going to start to lock in, it's going to start to build, and that's what we want. So these, this one here, this layer, very important to how successful and the return on investment you're going to get from your exercises. If you don't do a good job here, you're going to start wasting your time here and you're going to get into all sorts of problems. Also, this here is what's causing your pain. So if you do a good job here, you're never going to have a flare-up and never have pain ever again. So again, this is the most important layer, and that's why having that initial assessment is very important. What are for you, what are your actual pain triggers that are sensitizing you back to pain? Everyone's going to be a little bit different. Even with people with similar injuries, things are going to be subtly different. And the more we can get on top of those nuances and subtleties and then work back into your day-to-day habits and find out where they're occurring, the greater success we're going to have, and a lot sooner. And if you can change those habits for the better long term, that's going to stop you having flare-ups in the future and prevent you having back pain 10, 20, 30 years time. So, spinal hygiene, most important, so managing your aggravators and pain triggers. Then building your component skill, so things like your core, like McGill curls, side bridges. Can you get your glutes to work properly to control your hips? And then on top of that, we have your movement skills. So it could be just day-to-day movements. It could be movements in the gym that you want to get back into doing, or it could even be sport-specific movements. So for example, let's say you're flexion tolerant here and you have an active disc bulge. So we give you some extra lumbar support. We teach you to avoid flexing from your spine when you bend over to pick things up. We minimize, and that disc bulge starts to heal. Then we go to the component layer. we teach the ability to build a solid brace and to be able to control hip drive and extension from your glutes. Now we have those fundamental components in place, you're in a much safer place to then start to learn either a kettlebell swing or a deadlift or a squat, for example. But your ability and your success here, again, is dependent on these two layers below. The better job we do here, the easier and more successful this is going to be, and the far less chance there is that you're going to slip back into aggravating your back, trying to get back into these things. So the biggest mistake I see people make all the time is they generally do a reasonable job with a rehab exercise, but they don't take this layer seriously enough because they don't realize that everything else that they want to build on top of it is depending on not irritating that back and setting off that kind of injury cascade again. So again, if we want to be up here and you want to get back into sport and exercise, you have to earn your right to get there by building through these two layers. And the more solid these layers are, the easier and more successful this top layer is going to be. And everything going forward is subject to how well you maintain these layers here. And again, particularly, and I can't stress this enough, the spinal hygiene, that's the one that no one takes it seriously enough, and everyone makes the mistakes here. I've had people up here back at the gym doing really well, and I'll catch up with them 6 months later, go, oh yeah, I had a flare up. We'll dig it through. It's because they've let this crumble. So again, all of this stuff here and the things you want to do up here, the training and the exercise and the sport, is dependent on how well you manage these two layers here. If you get complacent and do a bad job, the whole thing is going to collapse again. So again, most important, understand for you, what are your actual pain triggers? Where are those pain triggers occurring day to day? And how do we change your movement habits to avoid them? Once we've done that, how well can you control those components consciously? The more you can control them consciously, the more work they'll start to do day to day, and the more workload they'll take away from your back. Once we've got those components nice and sharp, how do we learn to use them all together to do the movement skills and do the things that you want to do? Again, could be getting back into sport, could be getting back into things in the gym, it could just be certain day-to-day movements that you need to do well because you've got kids or a job or whatever it may be. So again, we've got to use that three-layer approach and be aware that these two are dependent on the spinal hygiene.